In the remote mountains of Tajikistan's eastern border, a hidden menace threatens villagers, farmers and nomads. Around 100,000 landmines are buried in the earth here. Some date from the civil war that ended in 1997. Many have also been laid along the country's borders with Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. The result is the same: tragedy for the people living in these remote areas. People like Sadaf Moore, who lives in a village close to the Afghan border. What should have been the happiest day of her life turned to tragedy.
It was October the 10th, 1995. It was my wedding day, and with his blessing, my father was taking me to my husband's house. As the road was blocked and we didn't have a car, we had to go on foot. And then suddenly the explosion happened. I didn't know it was a mine explosion. I looked down at my dress and it was covered with blood, and I couldn't get up.
To put an end to accidents like this, the Swiss Foundation for Mine Action has been at work in the country since 2002. It's the only international organization clearing mines in Tajikistan, and it's currently financed by the OSCE and the governments of Germany and Canada. Getting rid of these lethal weapons poses many challenges.
It is a very dangerous activity. It is a very time-consuming activity. It is a very slow activity. And in Tajikistan we have an additional problem. If on the one hand mine areas are relatively easy to identify, at least suspected mine areas are relatively easy to identify with respect to other countries, the geography and the climate that don't allow continuous work across the year. So work can start only in spring, April, May, and finishes in October, because in many areas it is simply impossible to work when it rains or when it snows.
Working alongside FSD's human mine clearers are teams of sniffer dogs. With their acute sense of smell, they can detect explosives years after the mines have been buried. They can work more safely and rapidly in terrain like this than people alone.
On my left-hand side you see a big steep slope and also the rocks in between. It means for our dogs, from my experience, it is not possible to run the dogs over. The dogs can reach the top of the mountain, but the dog is not concentrating on searching, because the dog is trying to find a good stay to go up, to climb up. He is not concentrating on his normal task. This is impossible, and what we can do, we can just make a safe line behind me, and we make it ready for the manual clearance later on.
Once the dog has located a suspicious object in the ground, it's up to its human partners to investigate. The mine has to be defused and removed for safe disposal.
2 weeks ago, and we spoke to the villagers in Shosharok, and even one of these men from the village guide us to the place, and he explained everything. And also he said within the last 10 years one accident happened where 3 people killed on this road by anti-personnel mine. And this shows us the reason that the task is important, to make the area clear for the community.
Okay.
The dogs are trained for their job at a centre near Dushanbe. They come from Germany originally. Each dog has its own handler. Together, they learn the routines they'll need once the real work starts, and they develop a special bond. So far, there hasn't been a single accident involving the dogs. Landmines are not the only weapons which go on killing and injuring long after wars have ended. Unknown numbers of cluster bombs are scattered across the centre of the country, which was worst affected by the civil war that ended a decade ago.
Those items we had found, they are airdropped, and they came in the big dispensers like these. These are, of course, the broken pieces of the airdropped bomb dispensers. So actually those munitions, like they're called cluster munitions, they sit in these round pieces, and a lot of them are firmed in these things. Yeah? And when they are dropped, some of them will explode and some of them will not explode. Like in both ways, they cause the threat and the death to the population and to their property.
Since the FSD started work in Tajikistan, hundreds of mines, submunitions and other remnants of war have been cleared. Millions of square meters of valuable agricultural land can now be farmed. But it's estimated that there are still 100,000 landmines and an unknown number of other explosives hindering development and communications for years to come.
Tajikistan is unique and positive in the similar way that Kosovo was. It's small, the minefield problem is manageable, and if we had the donor support, the support from the government is certainly there. If we had the donor support, we could actually clear the problem, start to end, with the correct amount of assets within 3 to 5 years. If we carry on the way we are going now, it could take up to 70 years.
In the Rasht Valley, the FSD clearance team pack the submunitions in sand for safer transport. They're taken to a nearby deserted airfield, far from human habitation. It's a satisfying moment. These dangerous remnants of wars long since over are disposed of safely once and for all. Rakhmatova has come to Dushanbe to have her artificial limb checked and repaired. After her accident, things went from bad to worse. Her husband didn't want a disabled wife. A few months later, he sent her back to her parents, where she now lives with her young son.
My husband divorced me and he got married again and lives with his wife. He has nothing to do with his son and doesn't support us because I'm disabled. He doesn't even want his son to live with him. All I want now is for my son to have an education, so he can make a contribution to Tajikistan and be able to help us both now that I'm disabled.
There's no work for Rakhmatova in her village. She'd like to learn new skills so she could support herself despite her handicap. But opportunities for disabled people in Tajikistan are very limited. For now, she's pinning all her hopes on her son. But how many more generations in Tajikistan will have to run the risk of injury and death before the threat of landmines and other explosives is removed once and for all? High in a mountain pass close to the Afghan border, Sadafmor Rakhmatova and her family retrace the steps of a fateful journey. Sadafmor last walked this route on her wedding day, going to her husband's house. But what should have been the happiest day of her life turned to tragedy. A landmine exploded and Sadafmor was horribly injured. Her leg had to be amputated.
I tried to stand up and walk. I didn't know that a mine had gone off. I looked down at my legs and I saw that my wedding dress was completely covered in blood.
Sadafmor's husband didn't want a disabled wife. A few months after the accident, he threw her out. She and her new baby moved in with her parents. The horror of her story is not uncommon in a country where many roads and fields are still booby-trapped with landmines. The only organisation doing clearance work in Tajikistan is the Swiss Foundation for Mine Action. It's a difficult and dangerous task. These are cluster bombs which were scattered in the Rasht Valley during the civil war that ended in 1997. They've been defused before being transported to a nearby airfield for disposal.
Tajikistan is unique and positive in the similar way that Kosovo was. It's small, the minefield problem is manageable, and if we had the donor support, we could actually clear the problem, start to end, with the correct amount of assets within 3 to 5 years. If we carry on the way we are going now, it could take up to 70 years.
That's not much comfort to Sadafmor, whose future looks bleak.
If I'd known that mines had been laid there, I would not have gone through. Health is more important than anything. I didn't know that what should have been the happiest day of my life would turn out like that.
This is Jan Powell of TVRL Switzerland for CNN World Report.
دهمی اکتبر سال 1995 مرا روزی تویم بود. مرا از خانه پدرم دست دعا برداشتن و خانه شوهرم گسیل کردن. ما از حسابی که در راه محکم بودن، ماشین ها نمیگشتن، ما پیاده اومده استوبدیم و خانه شوهرم رو در راه رفته استوبدیم. ناگهان در همین جای همین حادثه روی داد. مینه ترکش یافت. من میدونستم نمیگذاشتم، برای ما از همه اول سلامتی خوبه. ندونستم که همون یک روز خرسندی ما نمیخواستم که بهتری روز بگذره. او مرا به خانه پدرم جا مدودگی خودش اویله نو گرفتگی با زن نوش زندگانی میکنه. من پسرم رو تماما نگاه بین نمیکنه، از مو نمیفورش خواهی، چون که از حسابی ازرداری هم نخواست. پسرش را هم نمیخواه که قطعش زندگی کنه. فقط فکرم میده که پسرم بخونه هم خیلی یگان سهمی چی خچه در تاجیکستان در مادرش که خیلی جبر دیده خیلی یگان کار کنه روزی مرا برا نمیخوام شوهر دیگه.
Those items we had found, they are airdropped, and they came in the big dispensers like these. These are, of course, the broken pieces of the airdropped bomb dispensers. So actually those munitions, like they're called cluster munitions, they sit in these round pieces, and a lot of them are firmed in these things. Yeah? And when they are dropped, some of them will explode and some of them will not explode. Like in both way, they cause the threat and the death to the population and to their property.
ما ماشین برکش در 10 سانتیمتر قم میزنیم که برای سناریاد مینا رو یافتن زمین قم یعنی ما میکنیم سناریاد میمونیم دیگریش میمونیم که برای ماشین وقتی
Tajikistan is unique and positive in the similar way that Kosovo was. It's small, the minefield problem is manageable, and if we had the donor support, the support from the government is certainly there. If we had the donor support, we could actually clear the problem, start to end with the correct amount of assets within 3 to 5 years. If we carry on the way we are going now, it could take up to 70 years.
No, no. Tengiz 65 solar.
دویم کور بوستای ساگوی میناجوی سیم کوشی پرا.
How much?
Like the safety distance is 25.
25?
Minimum.
Minimum.
Minimum. Yeah.
Ok. Gruppo sanguigno, nome? 0 e basta? 0 più. Sai fare?
Plus aussi.
یگون چیزی اوچیب یگون چیز همه چیز حقیقیه
214 grammes d'explosif. Pour la détruire, nous avons 250 grammes d'amanol ou tétryl.